We are live.
We are. Good morning or good afternoon, Jacqueline, or good evening, depending on where you are in the world, people who are watching.
Yes.
I feel like
Happy
saying that
Thursday
every time
and
we
or
do that.
Friday, right?
It is my Friday morning here down under. Got to turn my camera. So for those who normally flip their screen that way, I'm actually flipping mine the other way because I'm actually upside down compared to that. The way we look at it is we're actually the top of the world. Everyone's just drawn the maps upside down. So.
You guys would think that way.
Confidence, We've gone to great lengths here. We use bugs and animals and stuff to keep out the keep out people out, but we're also too. I think we're using the government now that is doing
Right.
compared to the rest of the world is not doing so great. So maybe that's keeping people out as well. So,
Yeah.
but anyway, they're all part of a cycle. Good investment cycle. Things don't go smoothly. That's a good time to get in. So.
Right. It's good.
I was going to say that, which relates to our topic about when we're talking about the alignment loop, and when things aren't going so well, we tend to actually push things away because we've lost sight of our vision and what our values are, and that leads to what we lovingly call procrastination.
Right. And it's so interesting because if you're super excited about doing something, you will definitely do it.
Absolutely. And this is part of that clarity. I think a lot of times we feel like we should be doing things as opposed to that's who we are. And that's where that alignment comes in, especially in those times where things aren't going well and there's struggles. And as we know, the graph is never that meme that has the straight line going, this is the goal, and there's a straight line to where the destination is. Whoever created that, they need to be shot.
Exactly. Because it's never a direct line up. It's like this.
No.
And without the sound effects too, by the way.
Absolutely. And these are the things which we need to actually help plan for as well. It's part of what we're doing. We have to. It's like sales. If you have the plan of, okay, when I'm going to call, and they're gonna run to me and go, can I please buy that product from you? And if you have that expectation, you're going to be very disappointed very, very quickly. And so you have a plan, if you're planning well, is to go, okay, I'm going to plan for 8 or 9 rejections, because that's roughly what you're going to get before you get most sales. And so what's my plan? What is my, what are the obstacles I'm going to overcome? And you plan for those things. That's standard sales tactic, but same in when we're doing things as a CEO, you want to make sure that, you've got the plan and going, okay, what are the things that are going to go off the rails? How am I going to manage that when it goes off the rails? And that helps keeps you focused.
It is so true to be able to have that, for lack of a better word, vision, picture, so that when you do go off the rails, there is something that can bring you back. And it's so important. I was talking to a woman today, great conversation. She has an amazing company, and so many ups and downs, like so many things, and obstacles that she had, brand new. It's a plant-based product. She was creating a whole new pathway at the time, and a whole new, plant-based industry, new to market, and all the doors that got closed or slammed on her, but she never lost sight of her vision and what she wanted. And so all of those no's, we all know, all the no's lead to a yes. How many no's you need to get, there's a yes, or there's a new opportunity. You have to have the no's. But in order to tackle the door being slammed in your face, you just have to be able to go. And then be able to go, you need to have your vision and your mission and be aligned with what you're doing. So you have the grit and the gumption to keep going.
Well, and that's the thing that makes it, I find it interesting, is that grit and gumption that we talk about. I think that comes from when you're not aligned, because I know from my experience, when I find that I'm struggling, I've lost sight of that vision of what I want to achieve. And then I repeat what it is inside my head. You know, okay, this is who I am. It's part of that identity we were talking about. So we're aligning our actions with the value in our compelling future. And this is who I am. And I love Grant Carey's quote. He said, I pretended to be somebody until I become him or he become me.
Mhm.
And that's that alignment going, okay, well, and this is part of that journey. This is who I am. And this is part of, okay, now how would that person deal with this situation? And that's what I remind myself whenever I'm going through that. And then that grit and determination kind of goes away, because it's not, I don't have to fight against it anymore. I'm not having to fight all this stuff. It's just, this is who I am. So this is what I do. That happened last night. I was doing some work, and it'd been a long day and got a lot done. And then I started doing something. I thought, no, I'm going to finish this before I go to bed. And started to get a little bit of a struggle. And I went, hang on a minute. This is who I am. And I put some music on, and I just powered through it. And it wasn't effort. So powered through is probably not the right word. It wasn't effort. It was just, and it was done, and it was done well. And I moved on and went to sleep and slept very well. So it was good.
It was good. So, but it's interesting. So, maybe the word grit isn't almost like the right word in some ways. When you are aligned with what you're doing, you become unstoppable. Huh?
It's flow. There's research on flow as well. I was reading some research just recently. I found the name of the person. But it's getting into that flow state. We talk about being in the zone.
Right.
Yeah, and that's what it's like. So it's not grit. I think it's grit. If you're feeling that you've got a struggle, I think that's when you really need to go, okay, I need to get back into that flow state and reminding yourself of where you are and what that is.
Right. And and I look at it as getting into that flow state, and it's when you are aligned with that mission and vision, and you can get into that state of, okay, you know what, I'm feeling a little punchy about what I'm doing. How do I get refocused? How do I get into that zone? Whether it's turning on music, but you also think about, hey, you take a moment and you pause. No, this is who I am. This is what I'm going after. This is what I need to do. And there's a little bit of almost like self pep talk going in there. Like, this is what I'm doing.
Yeah.
But it also is, maybe it's more like that. I'm determined to do this. Like, so if you hit a wall, if you, let's just say the internet went out when you were doing whatever you were doing last night, and you're like, I can still do it without, I hit this wall, the internet's going to come back on and I'm going to keep going because I want to get it done. Or, again, I got another no. Nope, I'm going to keep going until I do get that yes. It's a little bit of a hunger, but it's passion, determination. Yeah, so maybe like grit's not necessarily the right word, determination to follow your dream and to go after what you want.
I think grit is it's the trigger. It's the trigger that you need to realign with where you are going. Because if you're feeling like you've got to push, and that's what we're talking about, this alignment loop. If you're feeling like you've got to push, like it's a struggle, like you've got to force yourself, and we know there's so much research that's showing that determination actually wears out. The willpower. Willpower is actually something that exhausts itself. Whereas if you're in alignment, what you're doing is, and chemically within your body, you're producing dopamine, which actually makes you feel good. So you want to do it. It's like, how we've all had that really, really bad day, and we feel tired and we don't want to do anything. And then someone calls and says, hey, you want to come out and party? And you go, yeah. And all of a sudden you've got this energy. The energy was always there. It was just the frame that we had in our mind and what that was producing in our body. And it's funny that you mentioned internet going out yesterday, because yesterday, part of it, I was traveling on the train, and went through a patch where the internet was struggling, and I'm doing something. Was actually trying to register a business name, and it would the internet would freeze, and it would actually go back to the previous loop. So I'd have to go back and re-enter the information again and redo it. But it was funny because I could have been going, oh, this is really frustrating. But it was like, okay, I just accept this is a situation. I know this path because I've traveled this path on the train many times, and I know the internet is not great here. So I just went, okay, that's what I've got to deal with. And rather than treating as determination, it was like, I've just got to do this step again. And it wasn't, I'm not saying I was jumping with joy because I wasn't, but it was like, okay, this is the process I've got to go through. And while I was doing that, while I was going through this other loop, I was looking at some other information while I was waiting for that to come back and loop back in again. I actually had and this is where I love technology now. On my phone, I had a document that I needed to read. So instead of reading it, I actually pressed the accessibility thing. So it was actually reading to me. So I had the headphones in, and so it was actually reading the document out loud. And then when the thing come back, I'd just pause it and then continue on. So I'd love that little feature on the phone that I've discovered now, that I can, in those moments, I can get it to read the document to me.
Right. I love that. I love that. But the key thing too is that was also a choice. You have a choice in how you respond to, the internet not working. You have a choice about, you have a choice to either be frustrated or not frustrated. You can decide how it affects you, and it's and a lot of times, we, that part of us where if we're not aligned, we have a choice because we can feel that within us when we're not aligned, things are pulling. You have a choice on what to do about misalignment.
Yeah, absolutely. That's that congruency.
Yeah.
If it's not aligned, that's where I think the grit comes from. And that's where that determination comes from, or the need for willpower comes from, is when we're not aligned. And that's actually what we're talking about in the specific part of the book. Once you get aligned with your values,
right.
You go, okay, this is my values, this is my compelling future, this is all in alignment. Now, when things are not going as I had planned, which just shows that your plan wasn't complete, because that's how it should be. You're going, okay, I just need to deal with that situation. And that was the case for me yesterday. That could have been tiring and frustrating, but because I wasn't tired and frustrated, I was able to go through right to late that night, and still have lots of energy, because I wasn't being worn out. I wasn't being tired, because that alignment was there. And it's like we talk about when someone calls up and says, you want to go out and party, all of a sudden you've got that energy. It's that same feeling. It's the same process. You're just using it to your advantage for where you want to go.
One thing that I think that's also really important, as we're talking about, alignment in your work and in your business. I mean, this is also where having the right people who are also aligned really matters, because when you are working with a team and there is a misalignment within the team or the people that you're working with, maybe the values are completely misaligned, or they're not aligned on the goals of the project or the goals of how work is going to get done, it can become really exhausting, and it can come that's also where your day-to-day work is so draining. And so being able to have those moments where, if you're working with your team, to almost like pause and say, hey, we need to get realigned here, and do those, quote unquote check-ins to see where is everybody. And it might be at that point you realize there's a change that has to get made with a team member or yourself. But that misalignment, when it starts to pull at you, again, that's a time to do a check-in.
Absolutely. I mean, that's a critical thing. Those things really affect how you perform. And I'm not sure what it's like in America, but certainly here in Australia, we've got legislation under the Occupational Health and Safety Act, which includes psychosocial well-being, creating workplaces where you actually feel that comfort, because it has a massive effect on your ability to perform, not having that team alignment. This is really critical, certainly from a CEO perspective, is really understanding what your values are, what your company's values are, and hiring people that are aligned with that, because if you don't, it creates you're there's nothing worse than walking on eggshells. I think we've all had that. Maybe,
Yeah.
say a lot of people have had that in a relationship where they've been with someone, and it's like you're worried about what you're going to say because that person might get upset and things like that. We've probably got that with a parent relationship sometimes. So we know what that eggshell feeling is, and the last thing you want that is to be in your work environment. You need to have those space. Your whole work environment needs to be that space where people can be free to actually to be in alignment with who they are and the organization. But and that's where that last bit is, and the organization is really critical, because if you're hiring just anybody that doesn't fit, then all of a sudden you're going to have things going everywhere. It has to be in alignment.
Yeah, it does. And it's so true. I mean, alignment with our vision and our mission is so important, and having people aligned within your team that way. Again, it can be the matter of great culture or bad culture, or getting a lot of things done or not getting a lot of things done. And I love some of the best examples of it is, whether maybe you're not the CEO, but maybe you're running a department and you've got a great project. How do you get everybody aligned to have that same goal and get everybody excited about it so that everybody's working together? And it might be that case that you find where there might be somebody that is, an outlier, and you may see an outlier happen within your team, and you might have to redirect somebody into either another part of the company or reassess how they are within the team. But if you want to get something done and you've got a big project, getting people on board and working together starts with alignment, vision, and mission. Well, like really actually starts the other way around: vision, mission, and then alignment, right? You've got to have that vision for what you do, the mission, and then, but they all have to come together in a nice package.
Absolutely, and we've got a whole section on compelling future in Charting True North, which is really, really critical. That compelling future, as you say, that vision, is the driver of where we're going. It creates that alignment, and everything comes around that. What is this compelling vision? What are we trying to do? And when you look at the great companies of the world, they all had a really amazing core compelling future that they created. It might have been called something else, like what are core values. I mean, you look at Apple, for example. There's a great speech of Steve Jobs talking about when he came back to Apple about getting into the core values of enabling people to use technology to do amazing things. I'm paraphrasing, that's not the exact words he used, but it was that core vision, that core alignment, which is really critical. And this is where, from your perspective as a CEO, when those times when you're not feeling that energy, it comes back to, are you still aligned with what your vision is? And a lot of times it's not. I had that experience as too when I was writing one of my other books. I was in the process of writing, and when I write a book, I sort of shut everything out and just go into writing mode and do that until the book is finished. And I'd just taken some time off, and I was studying, and I'd started binge watching a show. And I'd actually taken a moment to actually go out and relax, and I thought I'd watch an episode. 5 episodes later, I'm still watching. And so it's like, and then I got myself, and I'm going, okay, what am I thinking now? And what I was thinking was, I want to find out what happens next, which is, that's how shows are created. They create those cliffhangers, and so you find out. So I'm going, I want to find out what happens next. And I stopped and went, hang on a minute, I'm a writer. And that was, we're talking about that compelling future. I'm creating a book, and that's my future that I'm creating, and it drives me. And as soon as I said I'm a writer, it became really uncomfortable in my body to watch that next episode. And that's where we talk about, and we've talked about this before, Jacqueline, where we Procrastination doesn't really
Right.
exist. In
Right.
any moment, you're doing exactly what you want to be doing. And that, for me, was a great example of how that works. In that moment, I was thinking, I want to find out what happens next. As soon as I shifted my thinking, said, I'm a writer, brought it back to my identity, my values, my core purpose, all of a sudden, it was very uncomfortable to do that. And I actually literally got up and continued to writing, and it wasn't an effort. It was enjoyable.
And it's, because when you become aware and you're like, okay, I'm the writer, this is also my future,
Mm,
right? This is part of my future. Me
yeah,
writing is part of my future. And
ab-
and in our course we actually have, one of our foundational parts is creating, and writing out what's part of your compelling future.
absolutely. And that's where one of the things, and I think it's a statement that got misaligned, is we talk about being in the present. And,
Hmm.
and that is true to a point. Being in the present is you've got to be in the present moment now, dealing with what you're dealing with. That's correct. Especially if you're listening, engaging with someone, you need to be present to be doing that. But what it misses when we're talking about this part here, especially to do with motivation, to do with energy, it's the point of power is not in the present. So the point of choice and the point of doing is in the present. The point of power is in the future, which is exactly what you're talking about. You've got a future self that you're moving towards, and that's what drives you. If you don't have that future self, that's where the grit comes from, because you've got to, what are you doing?
Right. And key thing is again, the future self, right?
Yeah.
That is something I think a lot of people, as we're saying, we forget about. We have to think about, where we are right now. Do we want to stay in this mode, or do we
Mm,
want to move to something else? How do we want growth, and how do we want that growth to look like? What do we want it to look like?
yeah.
And a lot of times, again, as you said, if we picture ourselves as that future self, right?
Yeah.
We have to also plan for it. We have to think about where that is going to be. We can't just it's not a wake up one day. It's I'm moving towards it. I'm creating this future.
Absolutely. And that's where, I mean, a friend of mine, I was going to say old friend, which is true because he's an older gentleman, very successful business person. And he would carry I don't know, it's like, it was about this thick. And it was a ring binder thing. And in it, he had all these goals and his plans and stuff like that. And he would carry that with him. And on the front of it was the first 4 pages, if I remember correctly, was something he would read, and it summarized everything in there. This was his vision for the future. And he would read that every morning and every night.
Mhm.
And he would go through that and just clarify in his mind, this is who I am, this is where I'm moving towards, this is what I'm doing. And he was always full of energy. He's still around today, but he's in his 80s, I think now. But he's just always full of energy, always moving forward. But that was the thing, because he kept that focus there, and it was aligned with who he was. It was aligned with his family. Him and his wife, they have 7 children, which is, that's impressive effort. You know? um,
That's crazy. Sorry. You have 7 children. A lot of children. I
it's a
mean,
lot of
that's
um,
a mini
yeah,
bus,
yeah, very. There's tons of
right?
grandchildren as well now. But it was just one of those things where they, but that, so he had, obviously there's a family life to manage there. He's got, business to managed to do it all, but he was very clear about what it was and who he was and what his future was. And that's that alignment where we're talking about values and compelling future being aligned, and aligns with where you are. And in those moments, it's stepping back and going, hang on a minute, who am I? Like I was talking about with the book writing experience, sitting there, started to fluff around doing something else, is going, no, I am this, and creating that focus, and away you go.
Yeah. So, uh, you know, Damien, what do you think sort of happens to somebody, when they have faced that little bit of failure? How does that play out with somebody?
I love that the word that you use there, the failure. And because a lot of times we do that, we have this erroneous expectation. And I still do this. I was doing this morning. I was doing 3 things at once that I wasn't even planning on starting until tomorrow. And because they weren't getting finished, I was starting to beat myself up going, hang on a minute, why haven't you done all this? And it's like, just stop for a minute. That's tomorrow's work that you're actually ahead on. And so it does come back to that failure is how we set it up inside our mind, going, what are the expectations that we've set? What are the rules we've set for success? And from a psychological perspective, negative experiences are weighted 4 to 1. Or is it the other way around? Whichever way, negative experiences will have 4 times more power than a positive one. So when something isn't going, when we have a negative experience, that has a stronger emotion to us, and it's a survival mechanism. We're in a rustling in the grass could be a tiger, about to jump out and eat us back in the day. So we needed to be aware of that and heightened to those negative things for survival. But now we use that today, but we also created ourselves. Like this morning, I'm sitting there, I'm doing 3 things that aren't due till I weren't due to start till tomorrow. And then because I'm doing it a little bit slower and then needed to get ready for this as well, I'm like, oh, why isn't, I wish and then I went, hang on a minute, I've created that scenario. And this is where we need to be really aware of what we're creating in our mind. And that comes back to that alignment, our compelling future. What have we set up and where are we going? Because then you shift back, you actually know this is the reality. Reality is a good place to live. Right. It makes things a lot easier.
It is a lot easier to live in reality. It is. It's so much, but it's funny. So, getting started, and so I'm curious about this. Like the 3 things that you were doing this morning, a lot of times what ends up happening is when we do things, does it take away from something else that we're supposed to be doing?
Yeah, well, and that's a good point. And from my perspective this morning, it was more, I'd got up early. I'd woke up, I was laying in bed, and I went, I'll just get up and start doing some stuff. Do it now instead of doing it later, because I'd woken up, I was awake. And I have this habit of, I don't pick up my phone and start scrolling because that's just that's a time suck that's going to draw, right. And you're going to go down that rabbit hole. So I was laying in bed and just, I went, okay, I'll get up and do this. And that was the decision-making process for doing it. And because as we know today, we can set, something off, doing a task, and while it's doing some research or whatever, you're waiting. I tend to use that time to do something else, and things where I don't have to put 100% of focus in, I can set it off and doing something. And that's what I was doing. But the process was, I noticed I started to beat myself up on, why I'm not doing this as quickly as I should be doing it. And I was saying, hang on a minute, you're doing something that's not due till tomorrow. I don't know, I'm repeating myself there, but it was just really important how we create that feedback loop for ourselves. And this is when we're talking about that grit. Because it become the grit where I'm like, I started to feel bad about it. So I'm starting to push myself to move forward. I went, hang on a minute. Why are you pushing yourself to do something that is not even, you hadn't planned on starting? So don't do that. And it's like, you go to the doctor and you say, doctor, it hurts when I do this. And the doctor says, well, don't do that.
Right, don't do it. Don't.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, the bigger question there is to say, why is it hurting? Not like just don't, right? And in coming to understand why things are happening, we also need to, again, take a look at what's happening in our world, and how things are going to figure out the why. And a lot of times, again, it goes back to, mission, vision, alignment. If it's something to do with your body. Yeah, maybe something's not aligned properly. Maybe you're doing something wrong. Maybe you're walking the wrong way. In business, it could be the language that you're using, but we need to be looking at those things and being able to, and I always use that phrase MMA, we need to be measure, monitoring, and adjusting so that we always, because there are going to be times when we have a failure, or I'll call it an oops or a change. And so that's our time to spend a little bit in that measure, monitor, and adjust and get back to where we are. But you have to be able to reflect to be able to get there. And that's actually one of the things we have in our book. We have those journal prompts just for that reason.
Yeah. Absolutely, and that's really a critical component of that. And I think, well, from what I've seen, and I'm constantly correcting the bot on this because we use AI a lot nowadays, and I find it has that moving away from language. It's contrasting, and it's not saying specifically what you want. It'll contrast and say, "Oh, don't do this," and it's like. And we've talked about this before, the simple example of when we say don't forget. We're teaching ourselves to forget. And a lot of the languaging, when you look at it, it's not actually moving forward languaging. So when we're talking about a compelling future, this is what makes it easy and you don't have to have that grit, is that it's moving you toward. It's similar to someone saying, I don't want to smoke. You're setting yourself up that it's really difficult because you're thinking about smoking, and whatever you think about is what you move towards. And it's really, when you start dissecting language that way, the language that you use, saying, what am I actually saying here? What does that mean? And saying, don't forget, it will tell you many times we've said that, don't forget, and we forget because we've told ourselves to forget. But in a more complex way, when we're setting up our vision and things like that, it becomes where the language we're using is actually moving us away from what we want, because that's the language that we're using. And it's really important to dissect that and go, okay, what am I saying here? Am I moving towards what I'm getting to? Is what I'm saying here adding substance? A lot of times, and we see this in a lot of videos, where they'll spend half an hour explaining and telling you about some background stuff and you're going, just can you get to the point? And we do that ourselves in our own languaging inside our head. So we're going through this loop where we're creating this friction, we're creating this grit that we've got to fight against, and a lot of it that we're thinking about is not relevant to getting to where we want to go. But part of that is because generally we're not really that clear about where we want to go. So everything becomes relevant.
Right. Well, and that's being clear about where you want to go. Clarity, we've talked about this before. Clarity is so important, in that, in getting there, right? We have to be clear on our path.
Yeah.
Totally.
Absolutely. I mean, and this is where that's the specifics are really important. A lot of people say they know what they want, and so write it down. And they can't, because they don't really know. And it becomes very wishy-washy. And this is where it's really important that specificity is really, really important to removing that friction that we're talking about, this alignment loop. And it's once you get that, all of a sudden you become very clear. In this moment, what am I doing? And it should be very, very short sentence. And it's really that specific. It's in this moment, we're doing a podcast, that's the focus. In any other moment, it might be, I'm inspiring the team. Well, that's your focus. I'm clarifying what my goals are. That's your focus. I'm building this advertising campaign. That's your focus. And it becomes really important too when you're doing those things. I think for me this morning, because I generally have a rule that I finish what I start. And I knew I wasn't going to be able to finish those tasks. And that was where my frustration was coming, because I'm going to go, I don't want to come back because it's wasting time, because you've got to review what you've done before. So that was my fault for starting 3 things that I knew I wasn't going to be able to finish before.
And I have that same thing. Like I am doing a course. I was recording videos, and I had said to myself, I have to make sure I get X number of videos done. And I got to the end of the day yesterday and I'm like, oh my God, I've got 2 more I have to do. And
Yeah.
it was eat dinner, get back here and start recording.
Mm.
And if I hadn't, I know that I would have, basically hit the pillow and been mad
Mm.
because I wasn't staying true to, myself and what I had said I was going to do.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And some of that too is an expectation of what's required to get to where we want to go as well. A lot of times we have an optimism bias as to the amount of things that we can get done.
Yeah.
And this is where certainly I think there was a push where people said, just get more out there. And that the quality dropped off. Certainly see that in Hollywood, where the quality of films and storytelling has just dropped off dramatically. And it just became a really I bring that because I was doing a bit of study in writing with to do with things that we're putting forward and how to put stories forward. And I was reading a little bit about Gene Roddenberry, and apparently there was a lot of writers that hated working on the Star Trek show, both the original and the Next Generation, because he had such strict writing rules. These were the rules, and you had to stay within those rules. But it created what it created is you had this legacy program that people still watch today, 40 years later. Whereas without those strong rules, we start to let that slip. And I think that's where we need to be mindful of when we're preparing things as well. Are we allowing the correct amount of time to do that? Because I did a similar sort of thing where I said I was going to shoot and do all these movies in this really short period, what I thought was a reasonable period of time. But then when I've gone to do it, it's like it was way underestimated.
And I think this is actually, again, going back to alignment and values, this is actually one of the things that I think it's really important that we have to be in that aligned with what we are doing on a day-to-day basis. And we also have to realize we have to be able to know what our capabilities happen to be. And as you're just saying, I see this a lot with a lot of my clients. I'll have them, they'll share their schedule with me in their week. And I look at it and I'm like, when do you have time to eat lunch? When do you have time to get up and deal with bodily functions? When do you have time? Because it's so packed. And I basically will say, I want you to take a look at this and you tell me what you think. Is this really aligned with how you want your day to be? Is this really, does this make you, when you look at this, does it feel good? Because I look at it and I automatically feel overwhelmed. I start to almost feel hyperventilating because you have every little thing packed and there's no room in there to breathe and think.
Yeah. A lot of that too, yeah, exactly. It becomes so packed full of information, and that creates a whole stress level of itself because you're fighting against that. When we're talking about that grit, that's right. I said I think a lot of that grit becomes self-created.
Yeah.
Because like you say, if you've got a calendar like that that's just got all this sort of stuff in and becomes really, really challenging to get things done because you don't actually get that time in between as well. And there's research on that which shows that you need a minimum 2 to 3 minutes between topics for your brain to reset, to integrate, for it to go into your unconscious. And we talk about that a lot, about how using your unconscious to your advantage. And I mentioned that last night. I mean, I had a massive day, come home very quickly before I was to go out again and going to a location where I was opening up. And I remember in the morning, I was thinking, do I need to take the keys with me? And I went, no, I'll come home. I'll make sure I come home. And I quickly had something to eat, just kitchen bench sort of stuff, nothing, and I was walking out and I literally had opened the door and half stepped through it, and my mind went keys. And it was like, because I told myself to remember.
Right.
And I'd also had that time to reset as well. Even though I was just having that, I took that time while I was having dinner just to push everything else out of the day, just to be quiet. And I think I watched part of a video. Yeah, I did. I watched part of a video, but it was a completely off topic, something just to reset the brain. And that's where it allowed that thinking to come through, that unconscious part to speak through, and this is where that alignment is really critical, because what happens in our brain is when we have those stress receptors happening, it actually it shuts off the unconscious part. It shuts off your prefrontal cortex as well, and you're operating from your amygdala. So you're not really thinking straight. You're thinking fight, flight, or survive, and you're not tapping into the unconscious part of your mind, which allows you to then assess where am I going, and making sure that alignment's there, because you've shut off your prefrontal cortex.
And as we're talking about alignment and the things that we need to do, and being able to have that space in between, what's also really important is making sure that the items that you are on your task list are also aligned with that mission and vision, and they're aligned with where you want to be going, with the person you want to become. And
Absolutely,
they all need to be purposeful. If it's not, it should maybe be erased, delegated, or give it to some, ditch it.
Delegation's a good one, but also too, a lot of the things we focus on are busy work that are not really moving us towards where we're going. There's a lot of things where people will do things, exactly, and there are key tasks that will move you there really quickly, and there are other tasks that just won't happen, and it doesn't matter that they don't happen, because you actually get there, and it might annoy somebody else, but from your perspective, it doesn't really matter, because it's not a key task that moves you towards that. And it is identifying that. And it's like you say, when you see someone with a calendar like that, you start to wonder, how many of those tasks are actually relevant to getting you to where you want to go, which is interesting too, when you're having a conversation with someone, or even listening to yourself, how much of what you're saying is relevant to getting to where you want to go. I mean, how many times do you have the conversation that just wanders off onto all these different random topics? We've all been in that meeting.
Right? And it's not focused. But it's so true, because when you have a calendar like that, and it's crazy, there's a lot of misalignment on it. At the end of the week, how do you feel?
Yeah.
Like exhausted, and not that you didn't, and you think, you look back at your week and you're like, what the heck did I do?
Yeah. And this is where that grit comes from. What we're talking about is you're so busy in different areas, not focused on where you're going, and that causes, that's why I'm saying, when we talk about grit, if you're in alignment, your body is actually working in your favor, and that's where you are producing dopamine, because it feels good to be focused, to get those little wins. It's like little Mario getting those little gold coins, every step. You set yourself up to get those little gold coins.
Right.
It's like dum, dum, dum. But it's literally, that's what it feels like when you set yourself up and you remind yourself. This is where that clarity happens as well, because you're able to go, okay, this is where I'm going, and this step helped me move forward. Or even when it doesn't go to plan, you can go, actually, well, it didn't go to plan, but I did this, and that's now moving me forward. So every time you do something like that, I can even feel it now. Just saying that gives me that dopamine hit.
Right.
And that's what makes yourself feel really good. And you're not then fighting against that, because part of what you're fighting against too is, if you're focusing on the struggle, you're producing cortisol, which cortisol has a function, but it also, a lot of it's going to wear you out and make you feel tired.
And that is the last thing that anybody really wants when we've got a big, we don't want to feel tired. We don't want, and then cortisol, all that stress, what it does, it has not always the best impact on our bodies.
No. Well, and then we take it further, don't we? I mean, some people, you might have a drink or a smoke, or, some people do some more extreme things, but then your body's got to recover from that. And it's really interesting how we adjust and stay focused, and when we've got that clear alignment. And even myself, I made a bit of an adjustment because I've got someone who lovingly likes to cook a lot of food. I can end up having large meals for dinner. And I'm going, hang on a minute. I need to, and because eating large meals before dinner is your body's then, when you eat, your body will prioritize digestion. It has to. Otherwise, the food rots in your body and poisons you. So it has to prioritize that. So a lot of energy goes to digestion. And so I've started eating less at dinner. And all of a sudden, the energy spiked even more, which is dangerous from my perspective because I'm already had 12 Red Bulls. But it's done in a natural way. That's the difference, though, because it became, it wasn't. It's like you said. I woke up this morning and I feel great. I'm laying there in bed going, okay, let's get on with the day. It wasn't like, oh, I've got to get on with the day. Because that alignment happens, and it's in how it's really important. It's not just this physical, not just the mental alignment.
Right.
It's also when you're clear about that alignment, other things fall into place, and
Right.
things too. You go, and especially when you're running a business, if you're clear about where you're going, it then becomes important. Finances are really important for a business, kind of a key driver. It becomes aligned. Do we need to spend the money on this, or can we do this in another way? And it's amazing how many times when you put those restrictions on yourself, how much better you perform because you find these little innovations, which is really, and that's coming back to what I was talking about with Gene Roddenberry, having these strict rules and going, no, this rule applies and we're going to do this way. And I mean, I was setting up with some of the stuff that I'm producing at the moment. Yesterday was part of that process, was going through and creating some very strict rules as part of the guidelines and the preparation. That those rules they're etched in stone. They have to happen. If it doesn't meet those rules, we start again.
Right.
Some people don't like that, but I think at the end of the day, you produce a better product.
Right. Well, sort of having key sort of standard operating procedures are really important for having and criteria. That is what makes things work the right way, and one of the things that you were just saying about, alignment, clarity, and having that, knowing, where your finances are going. When you have the alignment and the clarity of where you're going to go, that's the lens that you can look at everything on your calendar for. It gives you the ability to easily say, yes, that's going to work, or it gives you the great ability to say, no. And no is so important to be able to say. You need to say no to the things that don't align or that don't follow the mission and the vision. If you are not clear, then you start saying yes to the wrong things, or you'll say yes to the things that, again, might not be the right thing. So I'll say yes to doing that marketing when it's not the right marketing for what we are going to be going. So clarity and alignment together are a great lens for your business, so you can say yes or no.
Absolutely. And that's a very good point, Jacqueline, is that making those decisions becomes a lot easier. A lot of times the decisions aren't even made, which when you're not making a decision, you're still making one because you're not doing something that you should be doing. But that alignment, that knowing clearly where you're going and having your values aligned with where you're going, your company's values aligned where you're going. When something comes up to make a decision, the decision, it really isn't a lot of thinking behind it, because the answer is generally very clear because you're clear about where you're going. And it makes a big distinction. And that's exactly what I was doing yesterday. Was going, this is where I want to go. This is the standard I want to set. So to set that standard, I had to have rules in place to make sure that standard is met. Otherwise, it's not going to happen. And that decision was very, very easy from that perspective of having those clear goals.
Right. And yeah, clear goals, alignment, clarity, it all goes together,
Absolutely.
and that's, and it helps you again with to have the right lens or lenses to see things through to make those decisions.
Absolutely. And that's where we talk about procrastination. It's not real.
Right.
It's misalignment.
Right.
That's what's causing the procrastination, because either whether you're not making a decision, you're procrastinating on that because you're not clear about the outcome you want. When you're clear about the outcome you want, it becomes the answer becomes very, very clear straight away when you're clear about the outcome you want. And that's where procrastination, what it really is, it's a signal that you're out of alignment. So if you find yourself procrastinating as a CEO, you go, well, where am I going to? What is my vision? What am I moving towards? And as soon as you clarify that, all of a sudden the decision, it becomes something you physically feel, like I was talking about with the book writing.
Yeah.
It become uncomfortable. Literally, I felt it. It was uncomfortable to continue to watch the television, because that's not who I was. Well, I wasn't doing what's aligned. And that's where I said, that's where I think that friction comes from. That the grit, the need for grit. Because in your mind you're not aligned, and you should be doing something, but you're not aligned because you haven't fully embraced where you're going.
Yeah, and it's so true. And again, getting back to that procrastination, it is that lens that you're looking through that's saying to you, I don't want to do it. Why? I'm not excited about it. I'm not aligned with it.
Yeah.
I put it off. Ugh, I don't feel like, it's like, and you hear it all the time. Oh, I really don't feel like doing that. I'm going to do that later. No, if you are, again, if it's aligned with where you want to go and you are energized by what you're doing, or you realize like when you get that done, you're going to feel really great, you are not going to procrastinate that, because you know that doing the X is going to get you to Y, and then that's going to get you to Z.
Yeah, and exactly. It's like, this is my goal. I am X, whatever that is. And that's literally what I say, and that's part of what the Charting True North and Compelling Future is. It's, well, who are you?
Right.
And when you say that to yourself, I am X, like I said when I was doing the writing, I am a writer.
Right.
All of a sudden, writers don't sit there and watch TV. And it's the same, and it becomes uncomfortable to do the other thing. So the grit is actually, you become fighting against procrastinating.
I really love how in the book that we've actually added in there, great exercises to kind of work through your alignment and being able to reflect on how your day is and how the week has gone. And it helps you keep in alignment.
Well, that's the purpose, as Jacqueline, and certainly I think most people recognize, is that our behaviors are sets of habits. And that's where the book is designed that way, to set new habits. So this alignment becomes easy. It becomes easy to go through your day and just go, okay, I need to get this done. I need to get this done. And it's amazing what you accomplish and you get finished. I still, I get constantly blown away when I look at my day and go, wow, I did all that. And it's because that alignment was there. I wasn't having to fight against it. It was just really enjoyable to do. And it also frees up, time where you can go out and do things that you want to do, and create that life. And you just have this nice little balance. Those people that you look at and you go, they've got it all. They do everything. It's possible. It's because they're aligned.
Right. Right. And that's, and it's, when you have that alignment, you do get to you're living with purpose and doing things with purpose. You actually get to be able to decide how you want to be in your life. So you get to live your life, and not have life rule you. You rule life.
And that's the key thing. And one of the key things about being authentic is recognizing that it's not you out in the world. A lot of times people, especially today, I think, where we go, the world needs to accept me as I am. To a certain extent, that's true. Yes, as a being, yes. But the same token, where we use the example of being a surgeon, you don't want someone that comes in and has no surgery experience,
Right.
and but says I'm a surgeon, and you got to accept me as I am. You wouldn't let them operate on you.
Yeah.
The
Right.
same
Just
as a
stating
leader.
that they slept well last
Yeah,
night, got a good night's sleep doesn't mean that they can operate.
exactly. Exactly, and that's where same thing with leadership. It's not, you being as you. You want to bring who you are, but then embrace the skills necessary to lead. And there are certain skills as to how to interact with people, how to, create your own vision. Those things. I mean, creating a vision, creating that is is a choice. It's
Yeah.
not something. And when we're talking about, creating your future, your compelling future, that's a choice. That's a skill to doing that. And then that, or being authentic, is going, okay, what am I bringing from me? And now using that skill, how am I coloring that skill, which is in today's world, again, is really, really unique. Your ability to put you out into the world, especially when you're talking about AI. AI is just consensus information.
Right.
But if you use AI and go, okay, this is the part that's come back now, how am I going to color that with me? All of a sudden you create something unique that no one else in the world has got.
Right. And that's a big thing too. It's creating those things that are unique. And if you are going to be using AI for, make sure you put you in there, not,
Mm.
you have to show up in it.
Well, and that's really, really important, because it's like, because it is consensus
Right.
information. It's average. Average is never going to stand out. So it's like,
Right. Yeah.
it's where, it's one of those things. If you put yourself into there, and you'll find that a lot, if you're using it that way and you question what comes back from AI, this is really good. And you go, well, what about this? And it goes, oh, that's actually a really good idea. I didn't think about that. And it's like, because you're bringing you to that. Which makes a really big difference. But that's part of what the book Charting True North is for, is to then take you and color what's out there. And that's what being authentic is about, is being, you're having your values, but you're then coloring those skills, those foundational skills, which are critical. There's universal truth. You can't escape them. It's like physics. It is, and you just got to work with it.
Right. So obviously we've been talking about alignment, and I think this is actually a good point to talk about what we're going to be talking about in our next segment in 2 weeks, and that's transformative authenticity. It's a journey that never ends.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, because we keep evolving and keep going forward, and this is, I mean, and it's one of those universal laws as well. Is that life evolves, and the organism must evolve to match the environment, otherwise it becomes extinct. And so, as you move forward, and this is part of it can be a frustration or joy depending on your frame, but things are always changing, and so there's always opportunity for growth, always opportunity to discover new things. Some people don't like change,
Right.
but
That
when
is
we embrace change,
that is consistent
exactly.
change.
But the same thing. I mean, it's we kind of in that juxtaposition where we don't like change, but same thing. We don't want the same thing over and over again either. So we got to get that balance.
Right. Right. So come back here 2 weeks. We'll be talking about the transformative journey, and being truly a transformative in authenticity, so that you can keep being an authentic leader. So.